This is TWiT.
With us, probably one of the best-known security experts in America. He's a cryptographer. You may remember, I think he helped, in fact, last time you were on, I think we mentioned this, helped with the crypto in Cryptonomicon. And a perfect guy to have on during Heartbleed week. Bruce Schneier is here. Hi, Bruce.
Hey, hi.
Great to have you. So at the beginning of the week, you said on a scale of 1 to 10, Heartbleed is an 11, a very serious flaw. It's funny, we thought this would be the week we'd be talking about XP exploits. No.
Well, it turns out you never know, right? These things happen kind of at random. Heartbleed, you know, it was real interesting because for a whole lot of reasons. One, it was potentially catastrophic. It affected an enormous number of servers out there, and you can weaponize it with like 3 lines of shell scripts. I had colleagues who were up and running and scanning and attacking systems within 10 minutes of learning about it.
Wow.
So it was a big deal. It still is a big deal.
You were able to send a packet using this heartbeat technique built into OpenSSL a couple of years ago. You're able to send a malformed packet that requests data up to 64K from memory of the server, right? It's what, but it has to, you can't be specific. It's whatever's there.
Yeah, it has to do with how the heap's working, and it's kind of random what you get, but you can query that 64K multiple times, and you get different data. You don't always get the same. So if you're looking to get everything on the computer, you just do it again and again. Turns out you actually can't get everything. There are some weird reasons why some data comes and some data doesn't. We're still exploring that. But potentially, when we heard about this, you could basically grab everything, and it left no trace. I mean, there was nothing in an audit log that said that you were attacked, which made it really scary, and we had to fix it quick.
Yeah, the fact that this has been around for 2 years, it's conceivable that somebody knew about it 2 years ago and has been just pinging servers. How rapidly can you do this? I guess every second or faster.
Right, you can do it as fast as you can. And it turns out you can ping the entire internet and see who's vulnerable in about 15, 20 minutes, depending on your setup.
Wow.
So a bunch of researchers have been doing that, and so we can watch the decay of sites that are vulnerable. We do know that, and we have good evidence that before the announcement, nobody was doing a sweep of the internet looking to see who's vulnerable. So we have data from servers, from honeypots that we've been able to comb through, and have seen no one use Heartbleed at a global basis before that. We have no idea if they were targeted attacks.
But that's very good news. That means it seems unlikely that this is a vulnerability known in the hacker community. They'd be scanning sites looking for vulnerabilities. A targeted attack, well, you know, at least it's unlikely that you and I were a target.
Indeed, right? The good news is the hacker community did not know about this, it seems. You know, we started seeing scans within minutes of the announcement, but before that we saw nothing. So that's the good news. The other good news is that subsequent research over the week has shown that while it's possible in theory and has been done in practice to retrieve the private SSL key, you know, the master keys we're worried about, it's actually a lot harder than we originally thought.
That's very
another
good
piece of good news.
Because the concern was that all of these secure servers' certificates have been compromised, allowing massive man-in-the-middle attacks. That you're saying that seems unlikely.
That seems unlikely. It's certainly possible. Cloudflare is the company that's been leading this research. They've put up challenges. One of the challenges was met, so someone did manage to extract the keys, but it's not easy. It's not a slam dunk.
So for the most part, what do you get? Passwords, logins? What are you getting in these 64K chunks?
You get the random cruft of what the server is doing. So yes, you get password changes, you get web pages served. If there are credentials in the URLs, you get those. You get random stuff. You get a lot of nothing, but occasionally you get something good. And what we're seeing, and it's the obvious tactic from a criminal who'd be using this, is you just scan everything constantly, hoping you get lucky. Now, you know, there's some good news on our side. Some of this stuff is hard to parse. So, you know, it's sort of interesting to watch, and we don't know really what the effects are in terms of enabling crime. And, of course, it's now being patched. Now, a lot of the sites are no longer vulnerable. Now, vulnerable to the ping, there are any number of universities who are basically auditing the net every hour and watching as sites patch their OpenSSL. Now, that doesn't mean if they were compromised before the patch, they're not still vulnerable. They had to change their key and their certificate. There's no way to check that.
Right.
No easy way to check that.
Right. So the initial estimate was about 2/3 of the web would be, or of servers would be vulnerable to this. Is that accurate? And what is the number now?
That is accurate. The number is probably 10% that, and it's skewed because all of the big, popular, well-run servers have updated.
Right.
And a lot of the stuff that's left. I mean, I see a top 1,000 sites that are vulnerable list that some university publishes, and the sites are getting more obscure every hour that are still vulnerable.
Are there any big companies, though, that should have fixed it that haven't?
You know, I didn't see any, but I'm not going to guarantee there aren't.
It's an easy fix.
Like all of these patches, it's an easy fix. You install the patch. But closing the vulnerability is a multi-step process. I mean, this is one of the reasons it was so nasty, is that installing the patch is just step one. Regenerating your public-private keys are step two. Revoking your old key is step three. Getting a new key is step four. I guess you can switch 3 and 4. Right. And then every user on that site who could have had their credentials exposed needs to update their password, which is steps 5 through 1,000,000.
Right.
And all of those things have to happen in sequence. I mean, I updated my own website and had to go through all those steps, but, for me, it was pretty easy. If you're a banking site, at a minimum, any customer who logged on between when the vulnerability became public and when the site was patched needs to update their password.
Right. The good news is...
it might be nothing, but that's just prudent.
It's prudent. And the good news is it's not a bad thing to do once in a while anyway. So
yeah, it isn't. But, God, we all have passwords that we rarely use and we remember. We don't like doing this. But, I think it's safe that if you didn't log into the server between when the vulnerability was announced on Monday and when your server patched a few days later, you're okay. So those obscure sites you haven't been to in a week or two, I think you're fine at this point.
And second-factor authentication hasn't been compromised. Is that right?
No, I mean, what's been compromised is the public key, potentially, although it seems unlikely, and stuff that happened to happen on the server when someone did the ping. So if you got unlucky and your data was in the heap at the time the bad guys did the scan, it was compromised potentially.
It's pretty random, though, and it seems like unlikely that there have been mass compromises as a result.
It's extraordinarily random. Yeah. Mass is definitely unlikely. Yeah. And it'll be individual. I mean, I haven't seen yet anybody with any estimates on what sorts of crime has been a result of this. We know the hacker started pinging this vulnerability as soon as it was public. So they didn't waste any time. And it was actually triply easy. Yeah. What's interesting, some of these other vulnerabilities, they're now get a computer to run arbitrary code. This one you can't. Right. But this one you could really weaponize within a couple of minutes of learning about it. It's just so easy.
Bloomberg said that 2 sources told them this was an NSA bug, or that the NSA knew about it and had been using it for 2 years. Given its utility, that seems highly unlikely.
So we're all debating this right now, right? There was a Bloomberg article that said 2 anonymous sources said the NSA knew this for 2 years. NSA came out with, actually the Director of National Intelligence on his blog came out with a very strong denial. This is untrue. Answer is we don't know. It seems unlikely. This vulnerability is so big and so nasty. And the United States and other democratic countries, I think, are so vulnerable that it would make a lot of sense to the NSA, if they found this, to alert the community and get this closed. Yeah. I mean, it's a bigger risk to us than it is value. Certainly, the NSA probably got an advance notice of a week or so, like some of the big companies. I mean, I hope they took it and ran with it and attacked everybody they could during that week. They'd be dumb not to, right?
Might as well. So, who knows what you're going to get?
But that's what you do, right?
But they're good at
we
fishing
know they
expeditions.
Get advance notice of Microsoft bugs that are being fixed for the next patch
That's
Tuesday,
right. That's right.
And they just run with them for the week or two they have. That makes perfect sense. We want them to do that.
I'm curious. I saw Google said that one version of Android was vulnerable, 4.1.1. How could Android be vulnerable at all to this? It's not a server.
Well, anybody that's using OpenSSL and responding to pings is vulnerable. What I'm worried most about right now are some of the hardware devices, the low-cost, unpatchable routers and switches and modems, where upgrading involves the trash can, a credit card, or a trip to Best Buy.
Right.
I mean, that's not going to be fun.
These things are laden with problems. We've seen so many problems on these inexpensive routers. So,
well, I mean, it's because the economics is different.
Right.
I mean, essentially, they're like the computers were in the mid-'90s, but they're very low cost, very low engineering expertise. They're not built with the same care. Then they're not as robust. So they're built as throwaway devices, yet they have these enormous vulnerabilities. And in the mid-'90s, we got a whole community to embrace quick patching and open vulnerability disclosure and all of these things that made us safer. It's really hard to imagine the same systems working on your refrigerator just because nobody cares very much.
Bruce, do you think this, as some have said, is an indictment of open source software, that people can commit? The guy who did this is a German software developer who, I mean, we know who it is because there's a commit log.
Right, and he's been interviewed, and he's I'm sure really embarrassed about this. It's not an indictment of open source software. It's an indictment of software that isn't independently analyzed. I mean, this could have easily happened in closed source and proprietary software. Could easily have been thrown out there. The problem was nobody was doing the analysis. Right? And any software, open or closed, needs to be analyzed. Open software is more secure because it can be looked at by more people, because it's harder to slip in something like this unnoticed. But open source doesn't magically mean someone's going to look at it.
Right.
Right. And this seemed to have fallen through the cracks. It was an incredibly pivotal, important, critical piece of code that's just being maintained by a few guys in their spare time. Now, good for them, and I'm glad they're doing it, but they could use some backup.
Yeah. I feel bad for Robin Segelman, who's the German who introduced the flaw, and he just said, I forgot to validate a variable containing a length. It's just, I missed it. And that happens all the time in software. It
happens all the time. Now, something interesting to ask, I mean, if we're going to speculate about the NSA, I mean, they spend millions of dollars searching for vulnerabilities every year in critical software. If they didn't find this one, maybe we should wonder how well our money's being spent.
Yeah, this is like, you can't get more critical than the OpenSSL library used by two-thirds of all the servers.
You'd think somebody in the NSA would have looked at it and would have checked for all of these sorts of bounds checking problems and would have noticed this. The fact that they didn't, or at least claim they didn't, is independently interesting.
Now, we've heard President Obama, it turns out President Obama has said, well, the NSA will not have, if they find a flaw in software like this, and there's a compelling security argument, national security argument, for not exposing that flaw, then they can do that. In general, they will, but they do have an out.
Well, and this is all the weasel wording.
Yep.
As long as the NSA's mission is primarily to eavesdrop on the entire planet, there will be a compelling reason to keep these vulnerabilities secret.
Right.
We know the NSA purchases vulnerabilities on the open market. We know they keep things secret. I mean, this is a fundamental problem of giving the NSA both hats. That the same organization is in charge of security and insecurity, which causes some interesting debates inside the NSA. And this is called the equities issue. Right? And in this case, I mean, looking at it, I would hope the NSA would make the right decision, and if they did learn about it, would try to fix it, because I think we are uniquely vulnerable, more than, I'm going to make this up, the Russians or the Chinese, because we use SSL more than everybody else.
Bruce, can I ask a question about, I want to go back to the idea of nobody looking behind the creators of this code. Have you seen, as a result of this, a movement to create some kind of Q&A to do analysis arising from this? Are there going to be changes as a result?
I haven't seen anything yet, but I think it's something that will be discussed in the open source community. Unfortunately, a lot of the open source community are people working for altruistic reasons, not for pay. But as long as this stuff is being put in for-profit products by big companies, they should just pick up some of the auditing functions, and hopefully that'll happen. I haven't seen any concerted discussion about this. It'll certainly be something we're going to talk about because it's important.
I use LastPass. One of the things LastPass's security check does now is go through the sites that I have passwords for, and it does a couple of things. First, it assesses whether that site was bit by Heartbleed. That, I think, is hard to do since sites often obfuscate what libraries and servers they're using.
Yeah, but the way you tell is you do the ping. If you do the ping and it comes back,
right,
you know they're using OpenSSL. You know that they're vulnerable. So you can audit this.
You audit it by hacking it. Isn't that illegal?
Well, you do it at 4 bytes. You don't do it at an amount that actually matters.
Perfect. Right. You take a small amount. Okay, that's good. All right. And then they also, of course, check to see if the certificate has been updated. And there's no point in changing that password if a site was vulnerable and has the out-of-date certificate.
Right. And we're trusting that they've regenerated their keys.
And we don't know. We can't tell. That part we don't know.
Actually, that's interesting. Wait, and I'm thinking about this out loud. The public key would be in the certificate, so you can tell. Never mind.
If the certificate has been revoked and a new one has been issued in this last 5 days, then you're all right.
Right. Exactly.
All right.
And then if you have logged in during the danger period, you really should change your password at that point.
It's just good hygiene anyway. Just do it.
It
anyway.
is.
Yeah. All right. So I was curious to how well we can assess whether there's a problem. It sounds like we can do a pretty good job of that. All right. And so your advice to people?
Wow. My advice to people is we can calm down now. Do change your passwords if you have to. And if the site you care about hasn't corrected itself, you need to bug them.